Hello and welcome back to the Broll Property Group Vodcast, a platform launched in 2020 with the vision of consistently giving you an insider view of the ever-changing property sector. I'm Shahan Ramkissoon. It's great to have you with us. As leaders in the real estate industry, Broll is continually staying abreast with trends and sharing these with the market. In July this year, some of our leaders from our property management team joined the South African Council of Shopping Centers international tour of retail spaces in Los Angeles and Mexico. And today, we're here to unpack what they discovered. Before we get started though with our guests, take a look at this story we put together to give you the bigger picture. Millions of South Africans visit shopping centers every week. For some, it's a quick trip, but for others, it's an experience and outing the whole family can enjoy. It's for that reason the Broll Property Group is continually looking at ways to improve the experience people have when they visit malls. In July, their senior property management team joined the South African Council of Shopping Centers international tour of retail spaces in the US and Mexico. Their findings show with people now venturing out again post-COVID-19, they expect more. Consumers want variety and the option of doing different things outside of just buying essentials. Broll's team also noticed trends abroad that help business people with favorable lease agreements that ultimately set up entrepreneurs for success. All in all, the future of shopping looks set to change, and Broll is here to progressively lead the way. It sure is interesting to see what goes into our shopping experiences, isn't it? Joining us today is Vuso Majija, Executive Director at Fortress REIT Limited. Now, Fortress is one of Broll's valued clients and understands the importance of the industry and what it means to have a good working relationship in this space. We also have Nkuli Bogopa, Broll Property Management's Chief Operating Officer, and Theresa Terblanche, Divisional Director of Broll Retail Leasing and Sectional Title Management. Welcome. Vuso, let's start with you. What do you find interesting in your tour about the shopping centers that you visited?
Well, the thing that stood out the most for me is how they've concentrated on the look and feel of the shopping centers. They've spent a lot of time and money on landscaping and softening the shopping centers. My view is that probably in South Africa, our focus so far has been on more functionality, making the shopping centers work. And I think we're slowly focusing on the look and feel as well. They've got a lot of shopping centers that are pet friendly. In fact, most of the shopping centers that we saw are pet friendly. And those are things that we started looking at to see which shopping centers that we own here in South Africa that we can explore that type of thing.
Interestingly enough, during COVID, more people got pets because they needed the companionship, right? And South Africa obviously has seen an increase in the number of people having pets. So definitely something we should look at for our malls.
We saw one of the shopping centers, they had a dog grooming space, but you could, as a shopper, you looked into the shop front and you could see someone grooming your dog or someone's dog. So in one of our centers now, we're actually looking at something similar.
So Nkuli, let's talk to you about your observations of the US retail market in general. What did you pick up?
So the retail landscape was very buoyant, hardly any vacancies that I saw, and the trading density is very high, but it's a function of the economy again. I visited another state outside of LA, and the unemployment levels were at a -2. And everywhere you go, you see a hiring sign. We are hiring at the door, so they're almost short of people to come take up those jobs, so it translates into higher trading densities. It translates into much more premium brands being prominent at the various shopping centers. But also, the softening of the landscape away from just hard bricks and mortar, a lot more experiential, retailers that we found there. But also when you are walking around the mall, you see a lot of art exhibitions that are coming through. Also just recognizing the shopping center as a place to be rather than just a place to shop, where people are working from home. With COVID having happened, the investment that Vuso spoke about the mall owners having invested into the look and feel, bringing a lot more lounge seating areas in a shopping center where people can just go there to sit at the lounge. And of course, after an hour or so, they are going to spend money. So that dwell time having been increased by just the different seating arrangements that you find at the shopping mall. I think what also stood out was just the color and the warmth that is brought on by water features, ponds. It just brings life, and it brings a good mix between nature and the built environment. So it was quite refreshing.
There's a joke in South Africa, people from coastal towns say, oh, what do you guys have in Joburg? You just have malls,
yeah.
right? And I guess we need to make it more of an experience.
Exactly.
It already is, though, to some extent, because there are malls with waterfall features, lovely areas that have a glass so you can see out, etc. So
I think there they took it
a
notch higher.
Yeah, exactly.
And some retailers where they would have, I saw a mom battling to leave the shop because she came with her toddler children, and because the retailer put a putt-putt thing, and then there was a coffee station for the guys to just sit there while the mom is shopping, she battled to leave the shop. So you increase dwell time with some of these little tactics, and it helps.
I think also importantly, over the last couple of years through COVID, there's been some negative rhetoric towards shopping centers. Shopping centers are dying, that sort of thing. There was a lot of people at the shopping centers. So it reinforced my belief that shopping centers are not dying. In fact, even the department stores, some of the department stores that we saw, they were busy. So, in South Africa, in the newspapers, there's always something about department stores. In fact, globally, there's been stuff about department stores. But the stuff that we saw in the shopping centers, they were busy. So I take it that there may have been an oversupply at a point, and that supply has probably shrunk in the last couple of years, and shopping centers are thriving again.
So Theresa, let me bring you in, because this is quite an important question when it comes to a post-COVID recovery plan. Did any of the property management companies share any new retail leasing tactics?
Yes, there was one centre that actually shared a very significant leasing tactic. They had a huge area that was on the high street area of the centre in LA, central LA, and the tenant there didn't survive. So they had to find a tenant, which they couldn't because it's COVID and nobody's got the way and means to start a new business. So they got all the designers together and they said, okay, you all design, you all got a rack and you all got an area, and you put your merchandise there. And that is highly successful. It was very interesting. The merchandise was obviously over the top for the younger generation. And then we also saw a shopping centre where they're really investing in pop-up stores, where South Africa is very different with that. So the one example we looked at was they finance the pop-up store's tenant installation, and they make sure it follows suit with the shopping centre. In other words, it's not like you walk in. I can in South Africa tell you exactly who's pop-up stores, because we don't invest in it. We tell the poor pop-up store owner, you must invest, and then if you do well, then I want to convert you to a permanent lease, and then you must still pay money for a permanent TI. So they've sort of said, no, these are the future moms and pops or entrepreneurial stores, and we are proud of our centres, and we need to convert it, and the design and layout and the store fittings needs to be in line with what we expect. I think South African shopping centres are so pressured for viabilities and making it work and returns that we don't have a lot of common areas. So we go for highest lettable area. If you speak to any developer or any landlord, they'll say to you, what is the most lettable area that I can squeeze out of the site? And I think that's where we've lost the feminine touch, or the soft touch of the outside malls. And the other thing that I also picked up as well is that the American management style, in terms of their centre, they're very in touch with their secondary market, not just their primary market. So we sort of stop by the primary market and we know what you like, and we sort of think we've got it right, but they go further to 18-kilometre radius away from your centre, and they get in touch with them, and they know exactly what they expect.
So let's bring it back, because I've heard all of the good things, right? But I want to actually compare it to South Africa and what we're doing right here already compared to those countries also?
I think retail is the same everywhere. So you respond to what your customers in that particular area are looking for. So it's not always correct to have a direct comparison. But one of the things that's always stood out for me, particularly in the USA and to some extent Europe as well, is that earlier on we had grocers in our shopping centers. A lot of the American shopping centers will have fashion and maybe services and no grocers. And of late, they're starting to do that. That was something positive about South Africa. But then again, South Africa has got the benefit of being a follower. So America, maybe Europe, were the first countries to really invest in malls back in the 60s and 70s. And a lot of mistakes were made from there. And by the time we got into shopping centers, we learned a lot of what not to do from them. For instance, our shopping centers are not as big as the American shopping centers. And very often you hear about dead shopping centers. We don't have many of those in South Africa. So I think our position and our stage of development allows us to learn a lot from what other people do overseas.
And that's good to know that we actually are advanced in that regard because we learned from what they got wrong. So Nkuli, tell me which of the malls were actually sustainability minded and how important is that abroad?
Sure. So I'd rather answer the question the other way around and highlight some of the sustainability initiatives that we saw and picked up. And some are similar to what we are already doing in South Africa. Most of the landlords are already moving in that direction. And in some cases, what we can do better. I think what we can do better is the use of hand paper towels and toilet paper that's brown paper. So we still, I think there we can learn a big lesson. It stood out for me. But in as far as other initiatives are concerned, recycling at a retail center, having those options of those different bins, I think we could do better. Solar energy, I think we are well on the right track. A lot of our landlords are already doing that and invested in solar power energy sources and water harvesting initiatives, which we already are doing and seeing the benefits thereof. And I think from a sustainability point of view, they also under pressure with ESG, as we all are, and the landlords in the country are also currently very focused on ESG and growing in that direction and looking more at environmental issues. But for South Africa, the social issues are high on our agenda, and so that always stays top of mind for us. Just to add on to what Theresa highlighted earlier around, the incubation of the pop-up stores, I think as South Africa, we are a lot more advanced. Having said that, I think the investment into those incubations and making sure that their look and feel when you are walking through the center is not telling that they are being incubated. We can definitely do better. But from a social component, I think the focus on having more entrepreneurs being given the opportunity to bring their products on shelf and into these bricks and mortar spaces have really done a lot for our economy and will continue to do so if we continue on that trend.
Yeah, because small business is the backbone of the economy,
exactly,
right? And that's key in this industry, the retail space as well.
One of the advantages of America is that the economy has been growing for the last couple of years. It's a wealthy country. So with COVID and everything, there's been a lot of entrepreneurs that have come up and entered the retail space. I think probably in South Africa, that's one of the things that hinders us, that the economy is not growing, so you're not converting a lot of people to be entrepreneurs, and that's a challenge that we face as an industry, actually.
And this is a good question, because you answered this briefly a short while ago, Theresa, but how do you think South Africa compares in terms of its retail offerings and tenant mix, apart from what you mentioned already? Is there anything else you saw there?
Well, the bases are the same. So you evaluate what does your market require from you, what do they need, because you're there to serve your market. I just want to reiterate again, I think that we need to start looking wider than primary markets and secondary markets, and even maybe perhaps a bit wider than that as well. So in terms of footprint, I think we use very much the same philosophy, except that, so as which has said to us now that we are anchored by food stores, food supermarkets. So in the USA, that's rarely seen. They're mostly anchored by department store, upmarket department store, the Macy's, the Bloomingdale's, etc. So, and they occupy also about 15,000 square meters in each center, which in South Africa, our footprints for a supermarket is about 5,000 square meters, around about that. Well, the other positive as well by us is I saw very stereotyped tenant mix. All the centers we went to was exactly the same type of tenant mix. Very few moms and pops, very few innovative, creative type of, not the stereotype tenant mix. And I think we've got more of that. In South Africa, we've got much more smaller stores.
So Nkuli, tell us, which of the US retailers would you love to see in South Africa?
Sure. I think we were spoiled for choice when you get into the departmental stores, because you find a departmental store that services the average buyer and a premium buyer. So you walk into a Bloomingdale's and it's got Louis Vuitton and Gucci at the door, and it's a good mix. And I think that's what we are hungry for, something that services the lower end and the higher end in one environment. So Bloomingdale's was definitely a standout for me. A Target was great because it wasn't just a typical grocer or a pharmacy, so it gave you a combination of the two, and you found some clothing, so it was a good combination as well.
Well, hopefully it'll happen, right?
Talking to the right people.
Yeah, talking to the right people. So Theresa, this is very interesting because of what happened during COVID. Did you hear from any center management teams or anything that you noticed in terms of the consumer habits and how it was impacted during this period?
So the consumer habits in terms of the COVID period was they all went to the community centers and the neighborhood centers, and that continued. So they're still trading exceptionally well. They haven't gone back to your enclosed malls at all, specifically your 200,000 square meter malls and larger. And they prefer the external outdoor malls where you can go outdoors and walk and shop and the experience. So that is well supported in terms of that. And although the online shopping increased about 38% during COVID, now that we're back and the shopping centres have opened since 2020, they've also seen that the footfall is back, that the shoppers are back, the turnovers are up, the spend per head is up, but majority of that money is going to the community and the neighbourhood shopping centres, which I think is here to stay, because we've seen the same in South Africa.
Okay, well, great talking to you guys. Now, let me get your final takeaways from this trip. And Vuso, I'll start with you. What's your top highlight?
When you go on a trip like this and you go with your colleagues, industry colleagues, and you throw around ideas, we spoke a lot, we threw a lot of ideas around, and I think a lot of people want to start implementing some of those ideas that we're throwing around. So I think it's great. What I would have liked to have seen more is probably some of our architects should start attending these tours as well, because there's a lot of ideas that we as landlords and property managers would talk about, but you actually need someone who's in a creative space that can bring these things to fruition. So I thought that was great. And the second highlight, I've actually got three, but the second highlight is probably Mexico, seeing how retail caters for the very poor and seeing how retail caters for the very rich, which is very similar to South Africa. It goes back to our initial point that retail will respond to the demand of a particular market. So I think those were the major stuff. And of course, how they dealt with landscaping and softening the malls. That was a big highlight.
Nkuli, tell me, what was your top highlight from this trip?
The tenant engagement platform that is so seamless that they're able to use to communicate with these very premium brands, and just being able to see the biggest Hermes shop in the US and trying to get in there and finding a long queue. So there's lots of money to be spent there. But I think for me personally, it was my first time on the SACSC International Tour. It was great to be with industry colleagues, be with clients, be with, and get to see what makes them tick, and understanding that retail is one of the biggest driving segments in the sector. And so it was a big eye-opener, and I think I would say if you haven't been on it, it's worth the while, and it would be great to see other professionals on the tour, just so that we can all start moving in the right direction and be like-minded.
Yeah. Theresa?
It was wonderful to spend time with all the brilliant people of the industry. They're also passionate, and everybody's got something to add. And the dynamics were amazing. It was from owners, but I do agree we should have more professionals join us, and maybe that's something that we can work on. But I think the biggest highlight for me was the farmers market. It was adjoining a centre that was there, and they had a little tram going through the centre. But this farmers market was like an A-grade supermarket. It had all the different cheeses, nuts, vegetables. It was unbelievable, and it was so busy you couldn't move, and that complemented the centre. And I know that's something that we're battling with in South Africa. We're trying to bring the markets to the shopping centre and to create a vibe and a different dynamic. And I certainly took a lot away there from that, and I think we'll start looking at implementing certain of those scenarios. Maybe where we go wrong, we do it on a too small scale. So you've got one cheese guy and one nut guy and one meat guy, etc. And maybe we should say, let's start specializing in certain food areas and implement that in the near future.
I'm so surprised you guys went to Mexico. No one saying tequila was the highlight? Come on, really?
Well, it was too expensive to drink there, sorry.
They drank home-brewed Mexican tequila.
Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, well, thank you so much for your time and your insight. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
So there you have it. South Africa is already on that international level. That's how we roll, right? But we can make a few tweaks to up our game. And it's industry leaders like the Broll Property Group and Fortress Rate Limited that'll allow for our consumers to have the best right here on African soil. From me, Shahan Ramkissoon, and the rest of the progressive property people at Broll, thank you for tuning in.